Okay, and we're off. My name is Greg Farrar, and this is my daily COVID-19 trends live stream for April 16th, 2020. I will start with the countries, then I'll go to the states of the United States and finish with the counties of California. So here in the countries, we see what we always see, the United States far away in the lead, slowing down a little bit, as are all the countries, so that's no surprise. Let's move on. In daily new cases, still the trend line hasn't quite believed that we're heading downward here, but we are. Make sure we really do have, oh, wait a minute. Something has gone wrong here. I don't actually have the latest data. I'm going to pop over to the states and make sure that I've reloaded all my dashboards. Well, that would be a shame. I could completely repeat yesterday's show if I don't reload. This one has been reloaded. Interesting. Well, we'll look very briefly then while the other two load. It just takes a few seconds at the counties, because that seems to be the only one that's currently completely up to date. Los Angeles leading as always. So interesting the way these things all kind of look the same at the three different levels, where LA is way ahead, and so is the United States in countries, and so is New York in the States. Let's see how our loads are going. Still pondering, still pondering. I will tell you then, I'll give you the punchline at the beginning. As before, make sure this is really the 16th. Yes, as before, California is looking, its rope chart is looking pretty frayed. There are some things going up and some things going down, and we really want to see them all going down. So certainly no big shifts day to day. Usually there are no big shifts day to day, but we're seeing about what we're seeing yesterday at the California level, with certain counties way up here. San Joaquin and Santa Barbara still are way ahead of the curve, behind the curve. This is not good for them to be up and rising. Let's see if our country stuff is back yet. Come on, country stuff, work with me. No, it's taking exceptionally long. All right, we'll pop over to the states briefly. I will say, as my usual warning, New York's results aren't in yet for today, for yesterday really, for the 15th. And so New York numbers have this one odd data point that actually makes New York look better than it is, but still we can certainly see that New York's we can see the trend of New York, and even if we look at the report by state, New York is flattening out. This is the data point that is incorrect, but the rest of them, this trend line is clearly following the rest of them pretty well, and so New York has flattened out in new cases, and in fact maybe gone down. We do have this one high day, so we'll see. If not for that, we could say, yeah, there's definitely a downward trend, and we'll see on the next graph whether that's actually true. And my computer's fan has slowed down, so I think that means that we do have, the data for the 16th. So to start again, in some sense, here are the countries. The United States just shooting upwards as always, but you can maybe start to see a little bit of a downward curve. Maybe not. Maybe it's just going straight. Let's look at the cases by day. Here again by day, we've seen for quite a while now the United States is at a plateau of sorts. It's a pretty bumpy plateau with ups and downs, but it's certainly not doing this rise that it did all the way up to the 5th of April. So the United States clearly is flattened out. The curve for it has not yet indicated that, the trend line. I just keep waiting every day. I think it's going to be bending more and more downward, and someday we will see that point where even the trend line says, yeah, this is definitely heading downward. But right now the trend line is saying, well, maybe this is all just noise, and this is all just noise, and let's just be pessimistic and say the United States is still headed upwards. I doubt it. And the other graph, the one that looks at differences, changes in growth rates, the rope chart, will tell a different story, and will say that the United States has turned the corner, is heading downward. Many other cases, this new daily cases by country, you can see all of those major countries that have turned the corner have peaked and are heading down in new daily cases. Not so much for the United Kingdom and Turkey. Interesting. I'm gonna go look at that on this graph though, the per million, because that gives us a better sense. It'll have the same shape for all of them, but they're scaled by population. Yeah, Turkey still. Turkey was doing some wild stuff a few weeks ago. It's a little more sedate now, but it is trending upwards. I think we can maybe say that, as with the United States, you can see this curve starting to bend, and we can see that probably we are seeing a downward trend now. That it's actually peaked 3 or 4 days ago and now is heading downward, but maybe not. Maybe it's just trending towards heading downward. In any case, that's Turkey. The worst ones are Ireland and Belgium in terms of cases per million. Ireland. So yeah, here we have Ireland, really not looking all that great. It seems to have almost an upward, maybe an accelerating trajectory. That's interesting because as recently as yesterday, all the countries were trending downward. So it'll be interesting to see whether Ireland has broken away from the rope chart and is starting to trend upwards. It's probably too soon to say that, but especially the way all the dots are above the trend line here suggests that there's a pulling upwards of Ireland's trend line. The United States, we saw before, looking to have plateaued. And then another major, so the United States is only the third when it comes per capita, followed by Spain, which is definitely looking good with that downward curve, and the United Kingdom, which is not looking so good. The British Isles in general, not looking so good, though you could argue there's a plateau here. It's certainly not runaway in accelerating growth. But let's look at the rope chart. Here in the rope chart, we see if Ireland is broken away, it's not obvious here. We'll look a little closer, but we see what we've seen for some days now, which is that as a whole, the world is following a pretty consistent trend. There's this envelope of with Russia at the worst and South Korea at the best, and everyone else is pretty much following that line and heading downward. Even Russia heading downward. Where is Ireland here? Yeah, okay, so Ireland is certainly probably the worst of these right now. It is flat. Its growth rate is not dropping. Its growth rate, fortunately, is a mere 5%, so 5% new cases every day, but not dropping. So or barely dropping. I think we can still say that every single country in the world is dropping, even Ireland. But Ireland has bent its curve upwards in the past week and is now looking to possibly get itself back in trouble. So we'll keep an eye on Ireland, but everyone else, it's not good that Russia has a 15% growth rate, but at least they're trending downward. Their growth rate is trending downward. So Russia has a problem. It's, I would say, certainly the worst of the countries right now in its COVID-19 situation, primarily though because it has a high growth rate of 15% new cases each day versus the previous day. India and Brazil, which we had our eyes on as potential runaway epidemics, they also have above zero growth rate, and they have and they're not dropping rapidly, but both of them, like Russia, are dropping. So neither, even though India and Brazil are certainly danger spots right now, India, Brazil, and even more so Russia, and apparently Ireland, none of them are really alarming right now. To be alarming, we would need to see these numbers be up here, especially above 20%, and trending upward. That's when we can get alarmed. A lot of countries were like that a while ago. Back here, we had all these countries with 20%, 30% plus growth rates daily and trending upwards. But they got over it. Somewhere around March 16th, they got over it. They all started trending downward. And even now, no one has really broken that trend. There is this one, Peru. Yeah, Peru was looking a little troubled about 2 weeks ago, but Peru is now back in line with the rest of them. These lines are all just parallel. They're all heading at the same rate and in the same direction, which is a good direction. And I guess the real takeaway here is that almost all countries of these top 25 are below zero. They all have negative daily growth, with the exception of those 6 we've mentioned: Russia, India, Brazil, Ireland, Peru, and Japan we actually haven't mentioned. But look at Japan. It's crossing zero right now. It's barely above zero, and it's heading maybe even more sharply than some in a good direction. So for all that Japan has been a problem spot, it seems to be turning the corner right now. So I think Japan's going to be okay. Whatever they're doing, it's working. And then I'll just briefly, the ones that are doing best: South Korea, of course, has always been doing well. Austria somehow, in Switzerland, those some of the European countries which got the virus sooner and got it worse are now on this downtrend where they've got 10% fewer cases each day and are talking about opening things up. Germany, Spain, this is sort of the European cluster. And then the Netherlands. And then Iran, which also was a trouble spot a week and a half ago. We were worried about Iran, but it too has just joined the pack with this nice, steady downward slope towards turning the corner in daily growth and getting over it. So no bad news. There's no bad news here at the countries. Just like yesterday, just like the day before, this is new. We had bad news at the country level just a few days ago. But now for 4 days straight, the news at the country level has all been good. I will show India, because India also is one that we've been worried about. But it's worth noting that India has risen also noting that Japan, which was 25th, is now 22nd. I'll show you that. This slight positive growth that it's had for a few days has been enough to pull it past. South Korea is just about gone. South Korea has just about lost its place on this list, which would be great. South Korea, that would be a sign of pretty substantial sign of recovery for a major epicenter like that to drop out of the top 25. Japan, however, and India are moving up day over day, but at this rate, Japan shouldn't anymore. They've got their most recent day is a 2% drop. I guess unless all of these drop even faster, Japan could still move up even while dropping if everyone else is dropping even faster. But Japan at this point still not the best news, and India definitely not the best news with a 7% growth day over day. But it's okay. The growth rate is dropping. We're going to want to see India fall below the zero line before we can really say that things are going in a truly good direction for them, but definitely they're not running away exponentially with a new epidemic or with an epidemic, in spite of the concerns people have had about that. Cases worldwide sort of come and go. They seem to have reached a plateau, though, of sorts. Though, when you look at the very latest, this line, which the line that indicates the entire population of the world turning a corner, I keep waiting for this to hit zero, but it's really not. It's had a couple bad days worldwide. There must be certain countries that are pulling this upwards more than others, which is it's got to be these ones. So maybe Russia, especially, Canada, not Canada, India, Brazil. These 5 that are actually growing each day. Those are the ones the only ones that could be pulling these daily numbers upwards, the world daily numbers upwards. So as long as we have significant growth above that zero line, if all the ones below the zero line have small growth, then the strong growers will outweigh them, and we'll see something like this. So the world is certainly not over this. It looked for a while like they were trending, like it was trending in a good direction. Now we have this sharply upward mini trend. That's almost got to evaporate, judging from what we're seeing on the rope chart. It's hard to see how that upward trend can persist when all of the countries are pulling downward, and unless somehow all the ones below 25 have 500% growth rate or something. We just haven't seen them yet, and all the littler countries or the less hit countries are pulling this curve upwards. But anyway, the news for the world overall is still not great. 10% growth rate day over day for the world, though it is dropping. It's not dropping as fast as I thought it would, or as fast as it seemed to be going. Deaths by country. Let's do deaths per million. I'm sure. Yep, Belgium. There's Belgium for reasons that I have I don't hear about Belgium in the news, but it certainly makes my news every day. Belgium, far and away the worst country in deaths. It's almost double all the other contenders in deaths per million. So Europe has always been hard hit, but why Belgium? If anybody knows, drop a comment, and I can put it in the next live stream. Why is Belgium so bad in deaths? We knew Italy was bad in deaths because its population was so old, and this virus does disproportionately kill older people. But does Belgium have that same demographic? I don't know. But what I do know is per million, their reported deaths are much higher than everyone else. The United States did have a sudden spike in deaths. This is not, I think it was deaths, or was it cases? There's a sudden spike that's not to be believed. It's similar to the February 12th spike in China, where suddenly on February 12th, China said, we're going to start saying every case we think is coronavirus. We're going to report it that way, even if we never tested them. In the United States, New York, or the United States as a whole? I think New York decided to do that as well. And so suddenly there's this apparent spike that doesn't really change anything, but it will change my graphs. My graphs I have deliberately not attempted to do any sort of correction of any sort, really. I'm just taking the reported numbers and saying which directions are they headed. And so sometimes something like that will crop up that will change the angle of my lines, and we'll see that now as New York will look worse for a little bit because of the way they've changed their reporting. But I'm guessing even with that, New York is still going to be looking okay. United Kingdom, Sweden, Belgium, United Kingdom, Sweden are the worst in deaths. Spain and Italy, of course, the epicenters to begin with, turned the corner long ago. Netherlands also seems to have turned the corner. Switzerland also. Those are the victory stories of Europe. It's very clear that those are getting better to the point where I think at this point they're basically fighting I don't know if rearguard action is the right term. They're fighting a winning battle. Let's say it's a cleanup operation where they're still going to have to keep the pressure on, and some of these they're going to keep testing, and they're going to keep some shelter in place and social distancing and so on. But whatever they did 3-4 weeks ago succeeded. They've turned the corner, just like everyone seems to eventually. No one ever really runs away with this. I heard someone talking about herd immunity again yesterday, and herd immunity would happen with, as I understand it, when 60-70% of the population gets it. And as I discussed at some length yesterday, I don't think that ever happens. No, not with this virus. No place that I've seen has ever shown any sign of getting anywhere near 60-70%. 1%, maybe 2%, maybe. But yeah, so all of these places turn the corner, and it's not herd immunity that does it, as far as I can tell. It is shelter in place. It is testing, and just maybe it's just the natural progression of the virus, or maybe the natural progression of virus in conjunction with human psychology that scares the pants off everybody when they hear the virus is coming, and then they hide by themselves without even needing any particular assistance. So for whatever reason, though, the trend is consistent. The virus goes up, it peaks at, I still predict 1 or 2% of the population, less than 1% in cases we've seen, and then it goes away. Not miraculously, but gradually. So hopefully that'll continue. Now, as we'll see in California, there's some stories developing here that may dispute my narrative, as we see California, which had apparently done well, is now degenerating at least a little bit. But there are two clear outliers in deaths by country. There's Japan, which continues to have a remarkable number of deaths, growth of deaths, just way out of line with the general rope, and South Korea, which has a remarkably low number of deaths and the growth of deaths. So this is what we see, I guess, at the very end of a recovery. And this may be what we see at the very beginning of the recovery. It wasn't that long ago at the beginning of an upward trend. It wasn't very long ago that we were seeing this in other countries where we saw 40, 60% and some upward trajectory then as well from many of these countries. Maybe Japan is just at the beginning. maybe if Japan actually did manage to delay its epidemic by a month, it's actually very lucky, because that month the whole world has been madly trying to control this everywhere, and has succeeded. And now Japan has the benefit of a month of everyone else figuring out what works, and also the benefit of mad manufacture of ventilators and respirators. And I think Japan will find that it has an easier job of it than everywhere else. It can get healthcare workers from other places. Probably it can certainly will have an easier time getting its hands on the equipment it needs for this, I would expect, because other places won't need it anymore. So the death's still pretty horizontal overall. I think I detect a slight downward trend. Certainly there's a slight downward trend. The zero line was here at the bottom of the rope. Now the zero line is about a third of the way up the rope. So a very slight downward trend as the world is seeing the death rates drop, the growth of death rates. And there's been one bad day. The deaths still worldwide still appear to be turning the corner. It was just yesterday, and the day before, I think, that this line was at zero. So this shows what one little day can do, or only 3 days. 3 days above zero is enough to say, well, maybe we're not turning the corner. Maybe there's a beginning of a surge of deaths. And that would make some sense, because there was a surge of cases a little bit ago, and I have been wondering why the death rate seemed to be crossing the zero line even before the cases did. But maybe it didn't. Maybe it was just a little bit of noise in the data that had some low numbers, and now they're being compensated by a little bit noise that has some high numbers. And in any case, the death rates still dropping. The trend is surely down here, probably down. Maybe there's a beginning of an upward trend here, but 1 point is certainly, or even, 1 point's too little to say, and these points are more or less on the trend line. So I think it does look like world deaths are dropping, and the rate of the growth of world deaths is dropping. So as I said, don't believe New York numbers exactly. There's always this one date where they claim to have had, according to this Corona data scraper, anyway, they claim to have had 0 new cases. It just means New York's timeline for reporting things is a little bit later than the rest or something. But the trend obviously has not changed dramatically by that point. And neither are the other graphs. New York way ahead, New Jersey still way ahead in total cases. Also still way ahead even now in daily cases. Even as they plateau, so are the other states. And so if New York had plateaued while Louisiana or Illinois had taken off, then we could have seen a new first place here. But everyone's plateauing. All the states are plateauing at the same time. They're all turning the corner at the same time. And so no one's going to catch New York, probably ever. New York will be the undisputed heavyweight champ of COVID-19 throughout this entire epidemic, unless something really astonishing happens in some large state. California, the only possible contender, I would say at this point, completely loses its grip on the epidemic and starts shooting upward. But we're not seeing that. California is troubled right now in its handling of the epidemic, and I believe we're going to see it's by far the worst state of the union right now in the way the epidemic is going, but it's nowhere near where it's going to pass New York. New York really lost its grip on this thing early on, and it's taken it a long time to recover. And New Jersey, I think, came along for the ride, or I don't know, maybe blame them jointly, but something went very wrong in New York and New Jersey. They have got it under control, but no one else has done as poorly as them per capita. This is per capita, actually. Well, actually, let me see if this changes. Not really. It doesn't change it much. Per capita, though, it's not quite as bad. All my beating up of New York and New Jersey is still more or less warranted, but Massachusetts and Connecticut also are having a similar degree of challenge. No one else coming near, but this is where we could possibly see. If Massachusetts and Connecticut keep growing like this, they would pass New York. But if we let's just look at one of them, Massachusetts. This looks like a case where they didn't report a day and then they double reported a day. So probably it's more around the 200 mark the past couple days. So really this trend line is, Massachusetts seems to have turned the corner as well. But we'll see that again. The reason I do this chart, the rope chart, is because it's really hard to see from here whether it turned a corner. But the rope chart tells us that. It tells us whether it's turning a corner by comparing the growth rates and saying, are they going up or down on average? And this is interesting. Where's California? What's up with California? Okay, California I had imagined would be doing terribly, or at least badly, but it's not. We'll see what happens when we get to the counties. Looking at California separately, new cases, I thought maybe this was a case where we were missing the latest day, which was overly optimistic about California. It's certainly rising in new cases, but it does seem to be leveling off. It's not obvious that it's turned around yet, but the growth rate is dropping. And according to our rope chart, California had I guess they just had a pretty good day. Not enough to make a trend out of, but with several days below zero, California as a whole is looking good. I'm very interested to see what the counties will look like, because just yesterday the counties rope chart was very much frayed, with a lot of counties looking bad and a lot of counties looking good, but overall it was looking good, mostly because Los Angeles was looking good. I guess that's probably what we're seeing. We'll have to dive into California later, as we always do, and see what this is about. But California as a whole, yes, looking good. Looking quite good, really. It's got a average 4% drop in new cases, and, well, actually, never mind. I didn't see those points. So yeah, California it's looking all right. It's crossed zero, but it's had a couple of very high days and several lower days, and on average, the trend line thinks this is going in a good direction, but it's kind of flailing all over the place, back and forth, and who knows. Best guess is it's heading in a good direction. So back to the whole rope chart. I guess the main point here is that nobody's doing poorly. Got a somewhat better grip on this. Nobody's doing poorly. The only one who's remotely heading upwards is New Jersey. New Jersey is below zero, though, and their growth rate is dropping each day. They have fewer and fewer new cases. So even though they're flat, that's okay. The thing we really don't want to see is something that's above zero and rising, and New Jersey is below zero and flat, so really that's okay. That will get them over the epidemic if they can just hold that trajectory. The only one that's bad right now, remotely bad, is Georgia. Georgia continues to have an average growth. They've had a couple bad days here. No, that's New York. Where is Georgia? Let's just look at Georgia alone. Yeah, Georgia's had 3 bad days in a row, and that kind of lost them their trend. So now they're still trending slightly downwards, but not as well as everyone else. As of today, Georgia is our big loser, which is funny because Georgia, I think, was looking quite good just a couple days ago. All it takes is a few bad days, and suddenly the trend starts bending. So this is truly a horse race where suddenly you'll get someone just bursts out into the lead. Every other state has a negative growth rate and a downward trajectory, which is just great. I guess Connecticut is close. It's right at zero. I feel like I'm picking nits here. There's just not much to complain about in any of these states. But if we really wanted to complain, we could complain that Connecticut is about at zero growth, where we'd like it to be negative, and same with Massachusetts and is that Florida? Can't pick that one up. Virginia. But good. It's all good. It's all good except for Georgia. Georgia's had a few bad days. Given the trend of everyone, it's hard to say that there's really anything to complain about here. Georgia is headed downward. The growth isn't very high, 3% or something. But we'll keep an eye on Georgia. Georgia, again, is one of the states that has, I would say, they've balanced a little more towards letting people go out rather than towards trying to get the absolute minimum number of cases. And that's, I don't think, an unreasonable balance. I think that you can choose either way. But it's good. I'm glad that someone is making that choice just so we can see in the end how well it worked and how much of a difference it made that Georgia decided to let people go to the beaches. Or, that Sweden, I don't remember, what is Sweden looking like? That Sweden has really not worked very hard, or Brazil has not worked very hard to control people. Let's just look at Sweden and Brazil. So remember, the whole rope for countries is broadly downward. There are only 6, I think, that are above 0. Sweden is okay. It's not in the worst 6. Brazil is in the worst 6. So here, I think we might be seeing what we're seeing with Georgia, which is that if you take a lighter hand, then your epidemic will be slower to recover, but it will recover. That's what we seem to see with Georgia. It's recovering, but it's recovering more slowly than everyone else as of today. It seems to me, though, if I'm remembering, that we had some days where Georgia was looking pretty good. So we'll have to wait till the end of this and let the experts do the analysis of the data before we can really get any sort of sense of whether Georgia's decision was a good one. Texas also taking a little bit of a lighter hand, or maybe they're trying to take a heavier hand, but they're getting more pushback from their citizens. Texas is in the middle of the pack also. And the ones that are doing great, Louisiana and Washington. Washington, probably just because it was way ahead of the curve time-wise. It started earlier and ended earlier. And Louisiana, I don't know, maybe because they're doing great testing. This was our great concern spot just a week ago. Louisiana popped up on the radar as something to really be worried about, but they're way ahead of everyone now. A few good other spots, South Carolina and New York. And again, if New York can do 10% reduction every day and dropping, the United States as a whole is going to look good, because most of our cases are New York cases, most of our new cases. In testing, the testing curves here keep rising, as they will, because this is total population tested, not daily testing. Nobody's doing less than 0.5% right now. Virginia is the worst. Let's see, California is probably also, California is the worst. And New York has retaken the lead from neck and neck with Louisiana, both of them doing extremely well with testing at 2.6% of the population. Again, I think of about 0.4% of the population as a minimum that should be tested. All 25 of the top states are doing that. So all the states are doing what they need to, and maybe because of that, all the states have graphs that look like this. Let's move on. Actually, maybe just briefly look at the daily testing. How much testing? How many new tests are done each day? New York and Louisiana, I guess, they're still leading. So no one's going to catch those two, because they're way out in front already, and they're going faster than anyone else in testing. Connecticut, actually, if Connecticut continues to ramp up the way they are, they will catch those two, at least in daily testing. Connecticut is doing great in the speed of daily testing, or the acceleration of their daily testing. More and more daily tests every day. Massachusetts, New Jersey, Washington. But then somewhere down there is California. Pretty low in the pack, California. California, you're already not doing so great. I think testing will help. So, on to the counties of California. Los Angeles, as always, ahead, has the most cases total. Also has the most cases each new day. This is flattened out. I think as recently as yesterday, Los Angeles was, the trend line was still saying, well, I think it's going upward still. And the trend line is always slow to notice when things turn, but the trend line is noticed. And so that actually means probably the trend is now clearly downward, because the trend line always follows a little bit behind the latest data points, it seems. So Los Angeles visibly flattened out here. And since they are the major contributor by, a factor of 4 or 5 here, They that's good news for the state. San Diego also visibly turned the corner. There are some of those that are low enough I can't easily see them, but we'll see those in the rope chart. Riverside, not obvious. Riverside is clear second place though. Riverside has come and gone. It sometimes seems like it's been doing better. Right now, really not so much. Riverside has 4 days now that look like they're a little higher. Let's go to per capita though. That'll be more, I think, more interesting. Tulare is running away per capita. They are. Where are they in this list? Yeah, moving up the list as they will if they continue to do that. Tulare has maybe the biggest problem right now. We'll see on the next one. They certainly have the most cases per million right now, which by itself indicates a problem. Riverside again, second place with the most cases per million, but more. These aren't showing obvious signs of slowing. Tulare. Wow, Tulare. If this were, if I were to just eyeball this and say what's my guess, I would say Tulare is exponentially increasing. We see it kind of flat or even, but these are swinging higher and higher and super higher, and so Tulare is looking kind of bad right now. The next graphic again is really better. It's hard to eyeball these things, but that could be the trend line going right up there. Just one data point. Won't read much into it, but it's had one bad day and really 3 bad days or even 4 bad days, and so bummer Tulare. And then Riverside is doing poorly, but again Los Angeles is nice and flat. San Francisco is still heading upwards, but really looks like it might be flattening out. Santa Barbara. But let's move on to the rope chart. First glance, my first look at this says this is better than yesterday or the day before. Yesterday there was this real sense that the whole thing was exploding outward. I feel like it's pushing itself back in a little bit, just a little bit. There's some defraying happening here. A lot of countries are below the zero line, which is good. They're all heading downward, which is even better. A lot of counties are above the zero line. Some of them are, however, are heading downward, which is good. Let's zoom in and get a real good close look at these counties. On the good news side, we've got Los Angeles, the winner. Los Angeles was more than 20% dropping per day, and speedily heading downward. This is why California is looking good on that last graph. In spite of yesterday's sense that California was fraying itself into a new epidemic, it's not going to show up on the state level if Los Angeles looks like this, at least not for many days. When you group it all together on the state level, Los Angeles is the majority of new cases, and those cases are dropping very quickly, and the speed at which they're dropping is accelerating. So Los Angeles is looking great. 20%, that is great, and it's trending even faster downward. Sonoma also looking good. Sonoma's kind of in the low end of the spectrum, so this doesn't matter on the statewide level, but it's good for Sonoma. Contra Costa in the middle of the pack of cases, also looking very good. Contra Costa with a 18% daily growth, drop in daily new cases, and accelerating. Monterey looking pretty good, really quite good. If it weren't for those, I'd say this was looking very good. 13% drop and accelerating. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. I'm having trouble grabbing these. So Monterey, Alameda, which I think just a week ago Alameda was showing almost out of control growth, like really dangerous looking growth, but Alameda has certainly turned it around. Let's take a look at Alameda. Most recently in the San Francisco Bay Area, it's been San Francisco and San Francisco and Santa Clara that are the problems, but a week ago it was Alameda. Hello Alameda, where are you? Good. Alameda though, yeah, it's kind of hanging out there by zero. You can see that time a week or so ago when it was looking like it was, as of this day, if you just stopped there, you'd say, uh-oh, there goes Alameda up into the sky. But now, ever since, almost all their points have been low, and so we're gradually starting to say, all right, this is looking better. Alameda has lost its grip on it for a little bit and then regained its grip. And this probably isn't just noise. There really probably was some sort of a real world effect there. When we're looking at a single day, it doesn't mean much, but each of these points is an average of the 3 days preceding it. And then we have 7 or 8 points in a row. That starts to be real data for a large county. So something really happened in Alameda, no idea what. Maybe it was when they started picking up testing, or maybe this is when shelter in place took hold, or maybe people just started getting afraid because they started getting the news that their county was one of the worst, and they just locked themselves in their basements, and now things are better. In any case, Alameda looking good after giving us a scare. However, let's look at the San Francisco Bay Area specifically. Santa Clara still has not recovered. It was looking worse for sure, but it's still not looking good. It still has both of the characteristics that we don't want to see, which is a positive growth rate, 3% new cases each day, and an upward trend. That number is rising. Now, if you look at the most recent 3 days, you can see a mini trend downward. If that continues, we're fine. It'll do an Alameda, as it also sort of fluctuates above and below zero. But as of today, Santa Clara is still not looking good. 3% isn't bad. It's 20% where I really get worried. But it's still, this is not a county that shows a recovery right now. And quite the opposite. It shows that it is slightly losing the fight. And then San Francisco also. San Francisco and Alameda still not looking good. San Francisco has had a good day, but it's seeing a 7% growth rate. That's substantial, and the growth is flat or maybe even slightly rising. So San Francisco and Santa Clara still not looking good. They're not looking as bad as they were a few days ago, but still not looking good. On the other hand, I'm guessing, all right, never mind. San Mateo, also in the Bay Area, has had a couple of bad days, and now its trend is it has a slightly negative growth rate, but the trend of that growth rate is upward, and it looks like it might want to join San Francisco and Santa Clara on the wrong side of the axis here, on the wrong side of zero. It'll just take a couple more days like that, where it too will be headed in the wrong direction. So San Mateo, it still has one thing going for it, which is a slightly negative growth rate. It's seeing fewer and fewer new cases each day, but that's not good enough if you're trending upwards. Santa Cruz, which, as we always say, you can't really believe anything because we have so few cases, nevertheless is looking pretty good, had a good day. Monterey, I think Monterey is a winner. Monterey is one of the real winners, actually. We'll look at the whole rope chart soon. And then, what's the last one? Not Sacramento. Alameda is what we're talking about. Yeah, and Alameda matched up with Monterey is doing extremely well. So the Bay Area, I would say, not looking so great. It's got 2 counties that are looking a little bad. It's got a couple that are looking right on the edge, and then it's got a couple that are looking very good. But overall, that's probably a net loss for the whole pack. San Francisco Bay Area, not looking great. Let's look at a few other places. So we've already talked about how Los Angeles and Sonoma, I think maybe we didn't say Los Angeles, Sonoma, Contra Costa, Monterey, we mentioned. Here's that Alameda, which got me on my whole Bay Area kick. Placer, Orange, these are all good. These are all doing well. All the ones I just mentioned have both of the characteristics we need to see before we say this is truly experiencing recovery. They have a negative growth rate of new cases, and their growth rate is accelerating. San Diego also, negative growth rate and slightly accelerating. And again, even if it's not accelerating, a negative growth rate is good enough. It's just better if it's accelerating. It'll get us get us down to no new cases quicker. San Mateo, as we've said, is not looking quite so good, but at least it has another negative growth rate. Santa Cruz, we've already talked about. On the positive side, we have, I don't know, something keeps happening where I click and it double clicks. I don't want to double click, I just want a single click. And then it brings up the dictionary, which you probably can't see when that happens, but it does. On the positive side, we have, is that actually 2 lines overlapping there? It is. I think there's some, I'm going to zoom in super close here because I see a hint of red there. Nope, that's just an artifact of the way they overlapped. 2 lines up at the top there, 2 winners. We have 2 winners, San Joaquin and Santa Barbara. So those 2 are in the middle of the pack. This is significant. These are significant contributors, but certainly not top 10 contributors to the total cases. So this is one of those cases where it doesn't make a huge difference for the state as a whole. Los Angeles, the way Los Angeles goes is how the state will go in terms of its total trends. But for if you live in San Joaquin and Santa Barbara, your counties are doing very well. 25%. I'm sorry. No, I'm completely backwards. We just did the ones that were doing poorly, that were doing well. These are the ones that are doing very poorly. Sorry to give you false hope, San Joaquin and Santa Barbara. Your counties are the ones that are doing worst. You have both of the things that we don't want to see. You have a very high growth rate, 25% new cases every day, and since they're in the middle of the pack, there's a pretty good chance that these numbers are real. It's not just doing a Santa Cruz or a Monterey where there are or Stanislaus where there's practically no cases, and so one case can swing the curve wildly. There are a lot of cases here. Let's just look briefly at how many that really is. New cases in Santa Barbara and San Joaquin. Santa Barbara are seeing 20, 30 cases a day. It's not a huge number, but it's enough that we're not just seeing if it goes from 1 case to 2 cases, we say, oh no, that's 100% growth. It's enough that we're seeing data that's not super noisy here. So both of those, again, neither a major contributor to the state numbers because they're not in the top 10 or the top 5, but still definitely hot spots. If they see 25% growth every day for the next week, they're not going to be at the bottom or the middle of that list anymore. They're going to start competing with the San Mateos and the Alamedas. Or eventually they will anyway. I haven't actually looked at the relative numbers. But so that's too bad. Tulare, similarly with high numbers and accelerating, but not nearly as bad as those 2. And then we have Marin here. Marin also in the middle of the pack there is showing a high growth rate, 14% per day, and rapidly rising. They're rising as rapidly as the other 2. So I'd almost see a high growth rate with no, a high growth percentage with no growth of growth than something like this, which is a middle percentage but sharply headed upwards. So this is bad. These are all bad. The rest not so bad. We have Riverside, for instance, is trending downward and doesn't have a terrible growth rate at 8%. But then we've got Stanislaus, Sacramento, both trending upward with positive growth rates. So these are problematic for sure. They're growing every day and the growth is accelerating, but their growth isn't huge and the acceleration isn't huge, whereas in these cases the growth is huge and the acceleration is huge. So these are problematic, but not anything to be really worried about quite yet. Kern is doing okay. Looks like it's heading towards turning the corner. Then we have a couple that have come back from below 0. All 3 of these, a few days ago, were looking okay. Santa Clara now is showing positive growth. San Luis Obispo and Fresno. They're all, it's nothing much to worry about. They're all below 5% growth, but they're all trending upwards. So today looks, to my rough look, better than yesterday in that it feels like more things are down on the bottom here and more things are starting to unfray and to rejoin the pack. But there are definitely a lot of individual counties where the news is just not good. They've got positive growth rate and it's accelerating. Maybe because California is testing at a 5th the rate of Louisiana. And if we look at the testing percentages, San Francisco is doing very well in testing, not nearly as well as other places. they're still not turning that corner again, but in San Mateo is doing very well. And really, they're the major counties, the top 5. I think there's one that we still don't know about. Los Angeles is doing well. Santa Clara is doing well. San Diego is doing well. Riverside we don't know about. Orange County is doing okay. And San Francisco is doing well. And Alameda we don't know about. San Mateo is doing well. But all of these are in the range of 0.4% to 1% of the total population tested. We know that it's possible to test 10% of the population. Iceland basically has. We certainly know it's possible even in the United States for some reason. If for some reason it's harder in the United States, and it shouldn't be when you're doing it a per population basis, it's per capita. The United States certainly should be able to test 8% of its population if Iceland can. But we know that some states, which are looking the best, can do 2.6% of their population, like New York or Louisiana. And so there's no reason that California can't do this. I don't know why they aren't. I just keep saying this. This is still, I think, the worst news for California, worse than these graphs and the way that the trends are going, because I think those may be caused by a lack of testing. The worst news is that California still isn't testing well enough. Let's take one last look back at this. Well, let's go back to the states, actually. First of all, the cases, the rope chart. Well, yes, just yesterday, California, is that right? Wasn't it just yesterday that California actually was the worst state? It seems like, didn't yesterday's report show California as the standout ahead of the pack? I do believe it did, but now it's switched places with Georgia, so a lot can happen in one day, apparently. California, as a whole, is not doing terribly, according to today's data. They've got a downward trend, and maybe it's just because LA is really caught up and is pulling it back down. They've got a slight downward percentage, a few percent downward, and they're trending further downward. But in testing, California tests per million they're no longer in the dumper. They used to be the very bottom of this chart. They're doing better per day in tests per million than some states, but there are still a lot of California counties that are running away with this thing. Still, the news overall is better than yesterday. I think California, in particular, is suddenly, it's even abruptly, looking better than it did yesterday as a whole, with Georgia as the new worst case, and this is because Los Angeles has flattened out. Los Angeles is looking very good. Los Angeles has had a few low days, but there are other counties that are still troubled. So we'll be keeping an eye on California in the days to come. That's the news for today. I'm Greg Farrar. Thanks for listening.